Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Fisheries Management Section Leader Scott Gangl. Today we're going to talk about fall fish reproduction surveys. Scott, your crews are just finishing up the surveys. What are fall fish reproduction surveys?
Well, the fall reproduction surveys are done every fall on a variety of waters across the state, and what the guys are looking for is small fish. So we have smaller gears that are designed to catch small fish to gauge reproduction and stocking success.
Okay, so how are these surveys? You said smaller gear. How are they conducted?
Right. We use traditional type of gill nets and frame nets, and the difference between them and our summer surveys is that the meshes are a lot smaller, so they're designed to capture the smaller fish. So we're talking fish that are in that 2 to 4 to 6 inch range, maybe a little bit bigger or smaller depending on the species of fish. But basically we're not targeting the adult fish. We're not targeting to find out what the population is out there, but we're looking at just the small fish that were either stocked this year or reproduced this year.
You're managing a record high number of lakes, around 450. You guys do every lake every year?
No, we don't have the manpower or time to get to every lake every year. We try to get to as many of them as possible. We hit the high priority lakes. We hit the big three: Sakakawea, Elahi, and Devil's Lake for sure. We do hit some of our mid-sized reservoirs like Jamestown Reservoir, Ashtabula, Bowman-Haley, Heart Butte Dam. A lot of those mid-sized lakes that are important to anglers, we do hit those every year. And then some of the smaller district lakes we hit on an as-needed basis. And by as needed, it might be a new stocking. We might want to go and see how that stocking did, or it might be something where we're looking at forage in a particular lake so we can try to decide what to stock next year and that sort of thing. So we hit as many of those as possible, but we can't get to all of them.
Okay, what do you guys use the data for?
Well, we use it for a few different things. First of all, we gauge reproduction in our lakes, because it's called the Fall Reproduction Survey because it's designed to gauge reproduction. So on some lakes, like Lake Elahi, we don't stock anything in Lake Elahi. We gauge walleye reproduction and forage reproduction and other sport fish. The same thing with other lakes like Devil's Lake and Sakakawea. There are certain species that we do stock. Some years we take a year off from stocking, but they still have some natural reproduction. The other thing too is on a lot of our lakes where we don't see natural reproduction, we gauge stocking success. We stock young of the year fish in there, and we want to know how well those fish did. Did we have good survival of those young fish or not? And that really helps us to gauge that. And then the third thing that we get out of it is since the mesh is designed to capture small fish, we get a lot of information on the forage base out there, especially on a lot of our smaller district lakes where the forage base is fathead minnows, and they're fairly small. We don't capture them in the summertime with our traditional gears.
Any unique or high points this year?
Well, the highest point is still Lake Sakakawea. That one has been good for a number of years. High water has always been a blessing there. We've had good reproduction of virtually every fish in the lake. Talking to the guys, we said we're going to have a pretty good take of walleye this year. We didn't stock very many fish in there this year. We just stocked the lower end, and we didn't see really good stocking success from that, but we did see some good reproduction on the upper and middle parts of the reservoir. And overall, it looks like it's going to be another good year for walleye. But we also are seeing good reproduction of virtually every forage and other. We saw good northern pike reproduction. We saw good smallmouth bass reproduction. So all in all, I think Sakakawea is going to continue to be a high point. We had a lot of fishing pressure there the last couple of years, and people harvested a lot of fish. But we've also had good reproduction now with the high water, and that's not totally unexpected because of when you have a lot of high water, a lot of flooded vegetation, there's a lot of nursery habitat for those young fish to hide. There's a lot of food out there because there's a lot of insects that break down that vegetation. So it's not totally unexpected.
Right, so the conditions were right.
Habitat
conditions
right.
were right.
The conditions were perfect for good reproduction.
How are things looking at Devil's Lake, Scott?
Well, Devil's Lake is actually doing fairly good. We've had a fair to good catch of walleye there. It's probably tracking right close to the long-term average, and we didn't stock it this year, so that was pretty good natural reproduction up there. The yellow perch, we were hoping for a little bit better of a spawn of perch this year, but we actually got fair to good numbers of perch too, but we were hoping for something a little bit more. We're about due for a good year class of perch, and hopefully next year will be a better year.
Any low points?
Well, the lowest point still remains Lake Elahi. Honestly, we had a good reproductive event for walleye on Lake Elahi. We don't stock walleye on Lake Elahi. The reason that that's a low point is we've had 3 good year classes in 2014, 2015, and 2016. So there's a lot of mouths out there to feed, and we didn't see very much reproduction in terms of forage. We don't have a lot of the smaller, more warm water forages out there like the crappies, the white bass, the yellow perch, and that sort of thing. Those all provide alternate forages when the forage base is suffering, and it has been for a number of years now. Typically we see a good year class of walleye every 5 years or so. They're very cyclic, but we've had 3 good year classes in a row. Those fish are out there. Anglers are seeing a lot of smaller fish in their catch, but there's not a lot of forage. So we didn't need another year class of walleye, but it looks like we may have gotten one. It all depends on how they survive the winter, obviously, but we may have had another good year this year, and we're hoping for some better forage next year.
We came into the spring, Scott, pretty dry. We were worried that water levels were going to go down. We got some much needed moisture. How are things looking as far as water levels on the district lakes?
You know, we're still seeing a lot of the lakes that were dry this spring are still fairly low. We didn't get enough rainfall to really bring those lakes up much. We had enough in certain areas to kind of maintain them, and that's a good thing, but we're still kind of looking into the future. We could use some snow melt and some runoff to fill those lakes back up if they're going to be around for the long haul. Some of those lakes, the ones that you're talking about are the prairie potholes, the ones that filled up after the heavy winters of 2009, 10, 11. Those have started to dry out quite a bit. Some of them are down as much as 6 feet, 4 to 6 feet. So they're kind of at that point where if we lose too much more water, we might start to see some impacts to the fishery. If we get a good runoff, it can help the fishery, but by and large, it all depends on what we see this winter. And some of the rains that we got last summer were very spotty. Like one area would get a lot of rain and another area would get nothing. So it depends on how much we get this winter and where it hits to see how some of those lakes pull through.
Okay, overall statewide, from the lakes you guys surveyed this fall, things look pretty well?
Yeah, you know, in terms of the smaller lakes, we've got lakes all over the state that there's so many generalities that you could say, you know, some are really good, some aren't so good, but overall we're still seeing really good populations of fish out there. Our walleye are doing really well. This is kind of the time for walleye right now because we've kind of gotten past the peak of those newly flooded lakes where we had a lot of perch fishing, and now we're getting into these lakes that we stocked with walleye. We're still seeing some good stocking success from some of those lakes. We're also seeing some pretty good growth of our fish this year. That's one theme that we've seen across the years is that the sizes of those young of the year fish can vary quite a bit with growing conditions out there. This year kind of seems like a statewide theme. Those fish are a little bit bigger than usual, and again, fish have to survive their first winter to actually recruit, what we call recruit to the population, or become part of the adult population of fish. And that's usually a bottleneck, and when those fish can grow well their first year, that really increases their chances. So the future is really optimistic for those fish to survive and recruit next year into the adult population when they'll be 6 to 10 to 12 inches long by the end of next growing season.
Sure, a lot of good information, Scott. Thank you. For more information on what lakes were stocked with fish in North Dakota and what species of fish were stocked in the lake, go to the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov. You will find a complete listing of all the lakes stocked. For Fisheries Management Section Leader Scott Gangl and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.